Good morning, Year 5. I hope you're all well and ready for another day of reading. Today we're doing our second day of Floodland Chapter 1, where we're going to look at some questions around language and delve a bit deeper into the text so that we have a really good understanding of it, not just for our reading questions, but also that would really support you in your writing, both this week in your shared write and next week when you try something a bit more independently. So if you have not done the do now by now, please just pause the video here and you can access it via the home learning page. If you have completed it, fantastic. Remember, it's just day 2 we need to do because this is our second day of reading and we will go through the answers together. So if you haven't completed it, just pause the video here and go away and do that. And when you're ready, you can press play again. Great, so we're going to go through the answers together. So we have this little passage that we've created based on the book, and we're going to use all our brand new pieces of vocabulary to try and complete it. So hopefully you have a pen in your hand, and we are going to go through this and you will be able to tick if you got it correct or just fix it otherwise. Tick or fix. First one, I ran through the deserted streets of Norwich. So give yourself a tick or fix it. While the angry mob roared and shouted after me. The derelict, tick or fix, buildings loomed over me as I thought about Natasha and the allotment. Remember, Natasha was her friend, Zoe's friend, who lived, or who worked on the allotment, sorry. Finally, I reached the shed and clambered into Laika. She's in such a rush, she has to clamber. She's climbing awkwardly into the boat. I waded, take or fix, out into the waves and began to row in a methodical, remember her dad taught her how to row methodically in a systematic way, following steps, in a methodical manner which my dad had taught me. Soon I began to feel faint and weak. Oops, that's a spelling mistake on weak, I better fix that. And fell into a stupor. So she nearly was unconscious. She almost passed out with the exhaustion. So if you need to pause the video here, fantastic. Go and do that and just make sure you have it all ticked or fixed, and then we'll move on with our reading for today. Okay, let's get us set up for that. So we're going to reread chapter 1 today, and I'm going to explain what we're doing. It's slightly different from yesterday when I took ownership over the text and you listened along. Today, you are going to be reading with me. So like we do in class, we're going to do a paired reading activity. I'm going to read a little bit, and then you're going to read. So as we go along, I'll tell you at different points to pause the video and you to continue reading up to a certain point. And once you're ready, you can press play again and continue listening to me. So we're going to do this first part with me reading, and then I'm going to tell you when you can start yourself. Zoe ran, harder than she had ever run in her life. Her feet pounded through the deserted streets of derelict buildings. Somewhere, not far behind, she could hear the gang coming after her. It felt as if her heart would burst, but she didn't slow down. She'd been planning to leave the island for a long time, but she'd been putting it off. It was a big decision to set out to sea in a tiny rowing boat. Now she had no choice. So now you're going to read from this point here down to trust where the little mark is. So pause the video here and go and read that paragraph yourself. When you finish that paragraph, press play and we will continue. Okay, so I hope you're able to read that paragraph all right and you're able to do any self-corrections if necessary. Self-correcting is such an important skill so that you can understand and comprehend the text. So if necessary, definitely just read back over what you did and fix any mistakes you made. So I'm going to continue again and then I will pause the video again for you in a few minutes. Somehow, someone had found out about the boat she'd been hiding. A boat was an escape route, a way to get away from Norwich, which got smaller and smaller every year as the sea kept on rising. It didn't matter that there could only be room for 2 people at most in her boat. Others had joined in the chase, and now a mob. Can you remember what mob means? Yeah, it means a group of angry or excited people. In this case, they're quite angry and stressed, and there's a mob of 15 people, so a large group are chasing her, and they were hot on her heels, which means they were getting closer and closer to her. There's only one way out, to get to her boat before they got to her. She ran on while her body screamed for her to stop. A lovely bit of show not tell here by the author. Get back here, someone yelled angrily at her, though they couldn't see her. Okay, so now you're going to pause the video again, and you're going to read from this point here where it says it, down to running, and then press play again once you're ready to continue. Okay, great reading. I know we have lots of fantastic readers in year 5, and I'm sure you're really getting into this text. Just before she rounded a corner, she heard more shouts from behind. They had seen her. There! Come on, shouted another voice. Get her! Scared, she made the corner, but her feet slipped from under her on the wet ground. She went sprawling. So we can really see Zoe flying across the ground as she slips on the sodden ground underneath her. And she slid clumsily in the mud. She started to panic badly and made a mess of getting up again. She had dropped her pack as she fell, but there was no time to pick it up. Okay, so now you're going to pause the video again. That was my turn. Now it's your turn. You're going to read from here all the way to the end of the page. So pause the video and take your time doing that. Fantastic. Hopefully you press play again and we're ready to continue. In the dark, she had dragged the boat a short distance from the water to the shed. It had been very hard work. At night, she hadn't noticed the deep ruts the boat's keel had made in the sodden grass. In daylight, even in her mad rush, they were obvious. She'd be lucky if no one had already found it. Laika, Zoe panted as she opened the door. Please be here, Laika. It was all right. The boat was still there waiting for her. Okay, so pause the video here, and now you're going to read from pulling all the way down to her. Okay, my turn again. Take me with you. Come back. We won't hurt you. Just take us with you. Zoe could see their eyes clearly. She saw fear, but she couldn't trust them. Since she'd lost her parents, she'd made it a rule not to trust anyone. Zoe had heard people say they'd lost someone, when they really meant they had died. In Zoe's case, lost meant exactly that. It was still unbelievable, and so stupid. So we can infer here, we can read between the lines that Zoe's parents haven't actually died by the way she's talking, but she's actually lost them. She cannot find them. So pause the video here and read the small little paragraph from she down to away. Excellent reading. Slowly, she watched as the people dragged themselves out of the water and waded back to shore. Natasha was there too. That hurt most of all. Natasha was the closest thing she had to a friend. I'll just get set up. Zoe used to see her when the supply ships came, before they stopped coming. After that, she saw her sometimes at the allotments, when she went to put some work in to earn food. They would only have a little chat, but it was enough to keep Zoe from cracking up or going crazy. But now the allotments had sunk into chaos too. It's a really lovely piece of language, playing on the idea of the flooding and that the allotments are sunk into chaos, so the chaos has engulfed it as well as the water. Okay, you're going to read from here, from Zoe down to away again. Okay, brilliant. Zoe didn't feel scared of them anymore. Sorry, she said to herself quietly. She began to cry, but she didn't stop rowing. Her uncut hair fell across her eyes, but she didn't stop to push it away. Still she rowed on, her thin, hunched frame working the oars until finally she had to pause for breath. Feeling around in her pocket, she fished out her compass. It was the last thing she owned that had belonged to her parents. For that reason, she'd kept it in her pocket, so it's quite obvious that the compass means a lot to her, as it's the last thing she owned that had belonged to her parents before she lost them. If she hadn't, she'd have lost it when she dropped her pack. It was a little dented from her leap over the cemetery wall, but it was still working. Okay, so pause the video here and read from she all the way down to the end of the page with everything. And when you're ready, just press play again. You'll need to know how to do this one day, he had told her. He taught her how to use a compass, as well as a lot of stuff about survival, just in case the time came when she was on her own. Okay, your turn again. Pause here from and read down to water. And press play when you're ready to continue. Why don't you look where you're going? She'd asked her dad. When you're rowing, you mean? He said. Yes. Why do you sit looking backwards? It's just the way it's done, he said. You couldn't row half as well facing forwards. Pause again. You're doing lots of reading today. And go from it down to going. Press play when you're ready. She rowed and rowed until her small supply of food had gone. She put the compass on the floor of the boat in front of her, and every few seconds she checked her direction against it. There was no sign of land now, and a creeping fear began to seep into her. She looked at the compass, almost every stroke. It was her only chance now. Like magic, its tiny hand kept pointing in the same direction. It knew where she was going, even if she didn't. She lost all sense of time. The sun was somewhere way overhead. I'm going to read that again because I didn't read it correctly, so this is me self-correcting myself. The sun was somewhere way overhead. Now with more comprehension I understand it better, and beat on the back of her neck, making her feel dizzy. She pushed her hair out of her face, but the sea wind blew it back across her face. She felt faint. She was in trouble. Lovely short sentences here that you might be able to put into your own pieces of writing throughout the week. She had just enough awareness to pull in her oars, then she slumped over them. In her stupor, she replayed the nightmare where she had lost her parents. It's just at the end of this chapter, it's really clear for us, and we're able to visualize in our head or create an image in our head that Zoe has become faint and she has collapsed over the oars of her boat, because of the sun beating down on her neck, her exhaustion, all making her feel dizzy and create the stupor that she has fallen into. And so I hope you were able to follow along. If you need to go back over the video, that's absolutely fine. And stop at different points and to practice your reading, that's absolutely something I would encourage if needs be. But for now, we're going to go on to our questions. I'm going to model some, and then you're going to go away and do it. So these questions are also on the home learning sheet if you'd like to print them out. As always, there's absolutely no obligation to print anything out. You can just write the answers down on a piece of paper and post it on Seesaw, because no matter what format they take, we are absolutely delighted to see it on Seesaw and to see all the hard work you're doing. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do true or false questions based on the text. Okay, so the first one, Zoe preferred to hang around in groups as it was safer that way. So I'm going to do this one with you, and then you're going to do the rest of them. Zoe preferred to hang around in groups as it was safer that way. Page 1. Straight away, I'm going to have to go to page 1, so I'm going to circle that, as that gives me a massive clue of where the answer might be. Zoe preferred to hang around in groups as it was safer. So some keywords are groups and safer and prefer, perhaps. So what this question means, or what this true or false statement means, is that Zoe preferred to hang around in groups. She wanted to hang around with other people, and she felt it was safer that way. So now I'm going to get out my text. I'm going to go to the first page, which is here, and I'm going to read, and I'm going to find out if Zoe did in fact prefer hanging around in groups as she felt it was safer. So skimming and scanning the text, we don't need to read as slowly as before, we can just flick through it quickly. So Zoe ran harder than she had ever run in her life. Her feet pounded through the deserted streets of derelict buildings. Somewhere not far behind, she could hear the gang coming after her. It felt as if her heart would burst, but she didn't slow down. She'd been planning to leave the island for a long time, but she'd been putting it off. It was a big decision to set out to sea in a tiny rowing boat. Now she had no choice. Before, no one had bothered Zoe. Zoe was a loner. Most of the people left on Norwich hung around together in groups, but she preferred to be on her own. Now I'm starting to recognise keywords from the question that I'd underline: prefer, groups, safer. So you can see the word groups here. You can see prefer. Now, I'm not sure that she absolutely wants to hang around in groups or not, so I'm going to read around these words again. Zoe was a loner. Most of the people left on Norwich hung around together in groups, but she preferred to be on her own. It was safer that way, because you never know whom you could trust. So most people on Norwich want to hang around in groups, but not Zoe. She felt it was safer to be alone. So this statement, I'll read it once more. Zoe preferred to hang around in groups as it was safer that way is in fact false. So now you are going to follow those steps of looking at the keyword, going to the page, skimming and scanning, reading around the keywords, and then eventually deciding if your statement is true or false. So you're going to do the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then come back and we will mark it. So at this point, you need to pause the video, go and do these true or false statements, and then come back to me. Okay, so we're going now to look at the answers together. The second one, a graveyard led away down a hill where there was a small concrete shed. That one was false. So tick or fix. The third one, ruts from where the boat had been dragged could be seen in the daylight. That was true. So Zoe thought she couldn't see them because it was dark, but in the daylight it was clear that there were ruts in the ground. Natasha was a good friend. That is false because she had joined the mob, and now Zoe felt kind of betrayed, or that she thought Natasha was a traitor. Zoe kept a compass in the pocket of her bag. That is false. She kept it in her own pocket because if it was in her bag, she would have lost it when the bag had fallen, and we know how much the compass means to Zoe as it had belonged to her parents. And the final true or false question, Zoe fainted in the boat. That is true, as faint is a synonym of stupor, and we know that she passes out in the boat. Okay, so pause the video here if you need a couple of extra seconds to mark your work, and then we're going to go on to some language questions. Okay, we're now going to look at find or copy questions. I'm going to do one again, and then you're going to do the remaining 4. All right, so the first one, I'm just going to straighten this up for you. Page 1, and a quote from page 1. Her feet pounded through the deserted streets of derelict buildings. Find and copy the word in this sentence which means to hit repeatedly with force. Okay. So I have my sentence here from page 1. Her feet pounded through the deserted streets of derelict buildings. I need to copy one word, the word, no more than one word will be going in my answer box, which means to hit repeatedly with force. So if you're hitting something repeatedly with force, I'm hitting this table repeatedly with force. You can hear it and hear it shaking in the video. So I'm going to look for the word that means that. Her feet pounded, that sounds good, but I'm just going to keep reading. Deserted, I know that means where something is empty, so it can't be that. Streets, we all know what that means. Derelict, that means something that has not been looked after and has been run down. And buildings, so her feet pounded. My fist was pounding, my feet could pound. So her feet pounded through the deserted streets of derelict buildings. The word, which means to repeat it repeatedly with force, is pounded. And it's really easy as well to visualize Zoe running through the streets of a city with her feet pounding from the force she is running with. So the first answer was pounded, and you are now going to do number 2, 3, 4, and 5, either on the sheet if you've printed it out or else on a piece of paper. And you can pause the video here and come back when you're ready to self-mark your work. Okay, excellent. I hope you got on okay with those, and we're going to do these 4 now together and mark them. So number 2, page 2. Look at the paragraph that starts, "It wasn't far." Find and copy the word which suggests something that had not been taken care of and was in bad condition. Now I'm lucky because this is one of the words we studied yesterday and it gives me a massive clue. So I would have gone to page 2 if I've been doing these questions, and I would have seen the paragraph starting with "it wasn't far." I would have read this paragraph and looked for the word that means something is in bad condition. So I'm going to do this one with you as well. It wasn't far to the little shed where she'd hidden Leica, her boat. A couple more streets of derelict shops to where that was left. The city fell away into the sea. If the sea hadn't come, she might have been shopping here herself, with her parents perhaps. For much practice, she squashed the thought of her parents as soon as it started and kept on running. So I know the streets are empty and the shops are derelict. And from my vocabulary yesterday, I know that derelict means something that has not been taken care of and is now in bad condition. So the word, one word again, was derelict. So tick or fix your work. The third one, again on page 2. Which word in the following sentence means in an unnatural way? She landed awkwardly, but she'd won a little more time. So the answer for that one was awkwardly. Number 4, in the first paragraph on page 3, which word suggests the grass was wet? So we've gone to the first paragraph on page 3 and looked for one word or synonym to suggest the grass was wet. And the answer was sodden. So write in sodden. Sodden is a synonym of wet, really, something that's really, really wet. Okay, page 3 and 4. Natasha was the closest thing Zoe had to a friend. Find and copy the words which are closest in meaning to almost. Natasha was the closest thing. This is a tricky one. It's the closest thing she had to a friend. I need more than one word in this answer. So Natasha was almost a friend to Zoe. She was the closest thing to friend to Zoe. So the answer was closest thing. Okay, pause the video here if you need a few seconds to continue marking. Otherwise, we're going to continue with the last part of our questions for today. So we're going to look at fact or opinion. Now we started doing this before Christmas across Liverpool, Limerick and Sussex, and it can be a little tricky. So we're just going to look at these ones. So are these statements fact or opinion? Zoe was a loner. Okay, I know that this is a fact because Zoe hung around with absolutely nobody in Norwich. She kept to herself at all times because she thought it was safer. So that is a fact that she was a loner. She spent all of her time alone. So for the remaining 3, you're going to try and complete these, deciding whether a fact or opinion. Remember, opinion is a thought or an idea someone has. Fact is something where there is little argument about it, is something that is just true. Okay, so you're going to go away, pause the video, and do the remaining 3. You may also move on to the extension to summarize this chapter in 3 sentences. That is quite hard because a lot happens in this paragraph. So you're going to have to be really succinct in your answer and to decide on the 3 most important events maybe and to summarize them in 3 sentences. We look forward to seeing those answers and your ability to write a summary very shortly on Seesaw. So pause the video here, finish fact or opinion and go on to the extension. Okay, so now we're going to look at the answers to fact and opinion. So Zoe slipped on the wet ground on page 3. Yes, I know that is also a fact, as she absolutely slipped on the ground and she went sprawling. So that was a fact. So take or fix that. Zoe could clearly see fear in their eyes. That is an opinion. As that is something Zoe thought she could see in their eyes. We can't be absolutely sure that it was fear that was in their eyes. Maybe it could have been anger, frustration. But Zoe thinks it was fear, so that is Zoe's opinion. And final one, Zoe's dad had taught her how to use a compass. That is also a fact, because we know it was Zoe's dad that had taught her. There's no doubt about that one. Okay, so pause the video here again if you need extra time to take or fix your fact and opinion. Otherwise, please upload your answers to Seesaw. We really want to see all the hard work you're doing, and as well as the extension as well, which is an important skill to be able to summarise. So we hope to see you all tomorrow on our briefings and to view all the fantastic work you've been doing. So until then, thank you again for listening and reading along, and we will talk to you.